Innovative educators with Brooke Folgers. Find community, find strategies, find hope. My Roman Empire is seating charts. If you're at all familiar with social media, you might remember the trend of usually women asking their male partners, "How often do you think of the Roman Empire?" And then these men in these videos would talk and talk and talk about, "Oh, yesterday I was thinking about the Roman Empire when blah, 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 blah." I tried this with my own partner and he immediately had a response for me. So apparently, some of the male population, frequently is thinking about the Roman Empire. I am frequently, if not constantly, thinking about seating charts, seating in general, really. I think it is the most underrated, undervalued piece of our classroom. It is written off as just a management tool when it is so much more than that. So today we're going to get into why I hate open seating. I don't care if your learners are adults, kids, whatever. I hate open seating where people just come in and pick seats. And today I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to give you a few ways to think about how you can create seating that cultivates community. So today we're going to talk about the reason why intentional seating matters. Last episode, I talked about getting feedback from learners. Often when I see a lesson fell apart based on the feedback, I'll ask myself, who was sitting next to each other? Have we been in these seats for months? Were they new today? Was this, I mixed up the groups? Who was together? Who was influencing each other? Or if I get a bunch of exit tickets from teachers after a professional development where there's only like 5 or 6 who are super, super outliers, I will often think back and ask myself, were those people sitting together? And 9 times out of 10, when there's only a handful of outliers, yes, those people were sitting together and the groupthink was happening to the strongest degree imaginable. Is there someone totally disengaged who's usually engaged? Who were they near? Where were they sitting? Obviously, there's a lot more things that could be happening in these situations, but considering seating is one of my first lines of attack when looking at feedback, specifically outliers of feedback and negative feedback, because I firmly believe that community is the basis of education. Community is the basis of impactful, meaningful, innovative education. And we have to be willing to look at our seating charts and ask ourselves, how is our seating cultivating community? I just hate open seating. I never have kids walk in and pick random seats. In professional development with teachers, will often have some guidelines around seating. Why is that? What do people pick time and time again with open seating? Who they know best. We pick who we are comfortable with. We pick the location that we are most comfortable with. And for some people, this is due to accessibility. I recognize that. But I would say majority of the time, we are choosing seating so that we do not have to be challenged in our thinking. When we have open seating, we can also get into the mindset that, well, there wasn't a seating chart, so like I'm not responsible for like who sat where. False. If you are an educator welcoming people into a space for learning, it is 100% your responsibility, whatever you choose to do with seating. And if you think seating doesn't matter, my question for you, and I mean this with 100% seriousness, is do you know who Rosa Parks is? Rosa Parks' choice to sit in a specific seat, it impacted the civil rights movement. She is in our history books, our children's books. in pop culture, she will always be known as the woman who refused to give up her seat. If you think that seating doesn't matter, all you have to do is look at history. Seating matters, seating is political, and seating will make or break community. Now, I'm sure that there are a variety of counter arguments that may be flowing through some of your heads. So let's address those. One thing I think that's important to consider with seating is safety versus avoidance. Safety versus avoidance. For example, I had a student who refused to get glasses, and they could not see the board unless they were at the table group closest to the screen. So I always put them close to the screen. And I figured this out because I had an open seating day and they sat as far away from the board as possible and were completely disengaged and used being unable to see the board as an excuse to opt out of learning. That is avoidance. Safety. I had a student who said to me, "There is a student in this class who is homophobic and has bullied me for years because of my identity, and I feel extremely unsafe next to them." That student is telling me they feel unsafe sitting next to another student, and I will honor that with the seating. Don't let that be confused with the statements of, "Well, I don't know them. They're not my friend." Those are statements of feeling uncomfortable. Those are statements about wanting to avoid a certain situation. But the avoidance is because our learners have not been taught the tools to deal with that uncomfortability. So, how often do we let seating just be so that we don't have to do the work of teaching kids, teaching our learners, whoever they are, whatever age they are, to interact respectfully and productively, specifically with people who are different or unfamiliar to them? Safety versus avoidance. We honor requests of safety with seating, and we teach skills to combat the avoidance that can happen with seating. Another question or counter argument that might be going through some of your heads is, well, seating isn't negatively impacting the learning or the classroom environment or the workplace. Here are some questions to consider. Think about the concept of time. In public schools, we have bells that signal the start and the end of a class. And if you are late to class, if you're coming into class after that bell rings, you are tardy. If there's open seating and there is a student who is tardy every single day, what does that mean for them with seating? Well, it means they have significantly less options than the kid who walked in first. It also often can result in that student, that person, being isolated. They sit in the table at the back that has no one sitting at it. They have to stand in the boardroom because all the chairs are taken. Everyone looks at them while they try to figure out where to sit. Is anyone offering them a seat? Is anyone making space for them if there is a lack of seating? For some learners and some people, the concept of time is very different than our Western ideals of time. So the concept of coming in late is just different. Maybe they were in conversation with someone and they were really listening to that person, and that means they were late to the meeting. Or maybe that student doesn't have an adult to get them to school on time every day, and they physically cannot get to campus before 5 minutes after the first period bell. And then we're putting them in a position where they are highly visible and in a stressful situation of having to figure out where to sit after a whole community has found their seats. It automatically isolates. The other thing to think about with open seating, or maybe my less compassionate view would be unintentional seating, is bodies and physical spaces. Does every learner, does every person have access to a chair and access to chairs that are appropriate? A stool that is rickety, that is the last chair to get used, does not promote equitable accessibility. Do all seats provide the same amount of visibility? Who has access to the door? Who needs access to the door? Can everyone move around the room and get to chairs with their bodies in the space they're in? And if someone does not feel a space is accessible to them, how does that set them up to be the best learner they can be? If they are walking in and they feel that this room is not made or set up for me, how do we then expect them to engage in meaningful community? So I would hazard a comment, a thought, that open seating may not be working as well as you think it is. It might be working mostly fine, but is it working for all learners? And I think that open seating has more opportunities to hinder learning than to help it. And intentional seating has the opportunity to encourage learning. So if you're ready to try some intentional seating, I'm going to give you a few words of caution around avoidance. I've been in a lot of classrooms where intentional seating perpetuates that avoidance that I previously talked about. And that avoidance is not because of kids asking for things, but because of teachers avoiding teaching certain skills. So the first thing that I notice often with intentional seating is the chaotic kids, quote unquote, are put in the front or the back of class. My first question would be, what does that group of students look like? Because our education system is the way that it is, often that group, in my experience, in my setting, looks like Black and brown boys. So when those chaotic boys are put together, first we communicate to those kids, you are chaotic, so you get to sit with the other chaotic kids. So first we have labeled them as chaotic, that is who they are. Second, we have removed the opportunity for them to be with students who engage differently and therefore be with students that they can learn from. If I have a student who does some chaotic things in class, I'm going to put them next to one of the kids who is my strongest at discussion. That combination may result in some frustration between kids, but we cannot avoid that frustration, and we have to be willing to teach how to navigate it, which looks like giving kids things to say like, "You're really distracting me. Can you please stop talking? I don't agree with your statement because that's a really good idea. Can you say more about that?" When one of those kids who has been labeled as chaotic is told their idea is good or valuable by another student who is lauded as the class superstar, that's going to change how the kid who enters with chaos conducts themselves. We cannot put the quote unquote chaotic kids together. Another thing with intentional seating that can perpetuate avoidance is with our multilingual learners. I taught in a very diverse district with a lot of students for whom English was their second language. And often in classes, I would see intentional seating resulting in all the kids who speak Spanish in one table group together in the back. There is value in kids having a buddy or a partner who can help them with language if they are still in the process of learning English. They do not need 3 supports. 1 support is enough. Consider it pairs. If you have 3 learners who their English is quite low and they speak Spanish, do you have 3 learners whose English is good and speak Spanish? And then you have 3 pairs. Pairs are great for language support. We do not need whole tables of language support. By keeping students in pairs of support, they can then be integrated with the other students, and you're giving those language learners an opportunity to hear other English speakers, other native English speakers speaking, and to learn from them. Now, while this conversation about ability and language can sometimes feel uncomfortable, again, we cannot be avoidant with our seating. I do not want to walk into classrooms anymore and see a group of 4 white girls in the front, a group of 6 Latinx boys in the back, and 4 Black students off to the side. We have just segregated our classrooms with our intentional seating. And so, how do we use our seating to bring together a diverse group of kids, a diverse group of learners into a learning community? And seating charts are not enough on their own. With intentional seating charts that are not avoidant of these hard things we've talked about, we must have some strategies to help learners engage with one another meaningfully. What does that look like? First, we can recognize for learners that who you are sitting with does not have to be your new best friend. Often kids will say, "They're not my friend. They're not my friend." I would love for every student in my class to be friends, but that's not reality. What I say to students when they say that is they do not have to be your best friend. You do have to respect them and engage with them because we are in this learning community together, which means we need to give kids tools to engage. For example, if you do table groups of 4 or 6 and learners have to talk about content or questions, how are you framing that talk? Is it talk to your table group? Is it talk to the person across from you? Is it talk to your elbow partner? And do kids know who those different pairings are and how to make space for all the voices? To do that, you may need to have kids point to who's their elbow partner, point to who's the person across from them. You may need to have them practice doing whole group discussions around very easy topics like what's your favorite movie, to practice how to move from one person to another and to be active listeners. And if you think you do not have time for that, my question for you is, are we as a society good at building community with people who are different than us? I would say no. Taking the time to teach kids those skills will allow the teaching and learning in your class to be elevated to a new level and move at a speed and pace that is actually more efficient if you give time to teaching those discussion and engagement skills. Because then you're not going to be waiting around for kids to talk to each other or having to ask them to try it again with their group if they didn't talk the first time. It will happen and meaningful conversation will happen because the intentional seating has been paired with basic communication skills. Every kid, every learner, even adults need this. I give my adult learners and PDs sentence starters and questions when they talk. The best way to ensure meaningful community is structuring it to be so. The scholar Elizabeth Jelin, who wrote State Repression and the Labors of Memory, has a quote that I really love that I think captures what I'm trying to say about intentional seeding. She says, individual lived through occurrences are not transformed into experiences with meaning without the presence of cultural discourses, and these are always collective. With intentional seeding comes intentional community and discourse, where we are giving learners the opportunity to make meaning of their experiences. And this has to be done in a collective. So, if you're ready for some intentional seeding, here are my basic rules of thumb for creating intentional seeding. First, start with a map of the room, the class, the boardroom. Think about, how can I spread out the diversity? Racial diversity, skill diversity, gender diversity. If you're in the corporate setting, maybe even positionality within the company or whatever. How do I make it so that the alike people are not all together? If you're a classroom teacher, after you make your map, the first thing I would say is put the kids who absolutely cannot be near each other as far away from each other as possible. When I had my classroom, I had 7 table groups. If I had 5 or 6 kids who just could not be near each other, they'd go as far away from each other as possible and would not be facing each other. Make sure you keep the pairs who support each other together, like we talked about with language learners, or maybe you have students with individualized education plans who need some support with reading and writing. Pair them with a kid who has strong empathy and strong writing skills who can be a support. That is not taking away from a kid's learning to be a support to another student. If teaching is demonstrating mastery of a skill, then we have to be willing to put kids with different abilities near each other and create space for them to teach each other. And the kid who is not as strong of a writer will teach the other student things about communication and patience that are just as important. So after you spread out your students who can't be together, after you place your pairs, then you just fill in the rest. And there's your seating chart. You'll notice I really haven't said seating chart though. I've said intentional seating. I think seating chart has been used in a variety of ways that are not always productive. So I prefer to refer to it as intentional seating. If you're working with adults, how can you give them guidance with seating? For example, find someone from a different department than yours to sit with today, or sit with your department, and then you as the educator would count people off and mix them up. Always offer, when new seating occurs, a community building activity, a community building moment. Whether that's a simple task like make a poster about this thing, whether that is a fun question, give people the opportunity to connect with someone they think that they have nothing in common with over something communal. This started out as a podcast about why I hate open seating and has purposefully turned into hopefully some guidance on how to create meaningful community in your learning spaces. Linked in the show notes is a list of seating decision-making questions. Short list of questions, kind of in an if-then format, to help you think about seating for the next time you are facilitating learning. Thank you for listening today, and let me know how your intentional seating goes in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow the show so you don't miss what's next. Leaving a quick review really helps us reach more innovative educators. Join us next Tuesday.